We are now moving on to step 24, another busy step here, and yes, lots of components. So first of all, we need our motor. We need also the motor plate, which is a BD11, and still amazed the motor still has this motor plate, which is like a gasket, like a paper or a cardboard gasket. We still have that. Amazing. Yeah, we also need the components here as well, which is our A1 component, which is this guy here. We also need this other one here, which is an A2 component, which is this guy here. We're going to need this, our sun gear. Going to need our spur gear, of course. And whoa, look at these. These must be the biggest bearings I've seen in a Tamiya kit. 2415s. Aren't they something? Look at that. Wow. Anyway, we need two of those. So they're the BD7s. They're the 2415 bearings. We need the BA18s, which are the 1050 bearings that come with the kit. These are the metal bearings that come with the kit. We also need that last remaining 850 bearing that comes with the kits. We also need the BD16, which is the 15 by 0.3 of a mil washer. It's a very small, thin washer, well, a very large washer, but a thin washer as well. We need some screws, the BA12s, which are the 22mm, the 3 by 22mm screws. We also need a couple of the BA8s, which are the 3 by 8mm screws, machine screws. We need this little guy here, the grub screw. This is going to go in the pinion gear, which is a 3mm grub screw, 3 by 3. So it's a BD5. We need a couple of washers, 3mm washers, which are BB4s, which are these guys here, and a couple of the BA12, the 3mm locking nuts as well. So I think I've got everything. and then obviously the central gearbox that we made in the previous step. So let's put this together. So I can do this again in sort of 3 stages, again, like it says here. First of all, set up the motor with the correct spacing for the pinion gear. Then we'll put in the bearings and washers and such like, and the sun gear into place, and then put the rest of the components together and the motor in there as well. Okay, so I'll show you how it's done. So for the first part of step 24, we're going to need to pop our motor plate on. So let's pop that over on here for you. There we are. And lining up the holes so that they're lined up. Okay. So now we've got that part in place. We also need to put our grub screw into position as well. So we're going to need to take our grub screw on the end of our wrench, our little 1.5mm Allen wrench, and we take the 25 tooth pinion, pop that into place. Going to put a little bit of thread lock on that as well, I think, as well. And what we need to do is put this onto the shaft of the motor with the flat area, and the grub screw onto the flat area. Okay, once we've got that, we need to have the right distance, 13.5mm. So if it was just 13mm, I'll be using my ruler, but I can never do a 0.5mm. So here we go. So I'm going to use my caliper to help me on this one. So let's turn that on. There we go. Right, so we need 13.5. 13.5. So now this gap here is going to be 13.5. So we now need to get our motor, and we can use that. That is actually 13.5. There we are. So that's now set the right space, 13.5mm. Done. Now we'll move on to the second stage. So for the second part of step 24, we're going to need our gearbox system that we made earlier. we're going to need our large, very large bearings. So these are the 2415 bearings. So that goes on there like that. Okay, so we're also going to need to put a washer. So it's going to go between the two bearings that we have. Then the other bearing there is going to be ready. So in the meantime, we need our sun gear. We need to take our 850 bearing, and this is partially greased, so let's pop that in there like so. And then on the other side of that, we're going to need to take one of our BA18s, pop that in there, and the A1 component as well. And like I say, I've popped some grease already on here, so that goes into the planetary gear system. Right, now we can put these two in together, so that slots through. And we just need to get that washer the right way. There we go. That's better. And then it should just clip into place. Wonderful. There we go. And that's the planetary bearings, yeah. I'll give that a little spin. Yeah. That works well. Okay, so that's the second half of this. We need to now do the third section of this. Just need to put some grease on this sun gear. So the next part of this, we need to take our motor mounting plate, and there's a little note on the drawing here that says the A2 part needs to be flush. So if you take a look at this plate, it's completely flush on one side, but then there's a recess in here on the other side. So this is where this A2 part, and there's this little locating notch. So you need to make sure that that locates in the locating notch, and that's nice and flush. There we are. So that's how that should fit. So we take our gearbox system, we place our bearing, and that's there ready for us to then place the motor system on top. But before we do that, we're going to need to mount the motor. Get that ready. Just going to wipe my finger. Excuse me. So we need to make sure this plate is the right way round. So I believe it should go that way round, in fact, because the shaft has got to come outwards. Yeah. And now we need to mount the motor. I think we're going to adjust this at the next step. So that's in there and ready. Let's take our assembly there, and now we pop those together, and you might see a little bit of grease squish out of here. That's because I've put a little bit of grease on them. There we go, because I like to seal between those. So a little tip here, if this doesn't go over correctly, this planetary gear system needs a good shove to engage, and that's probably why it won't close up. So let's pop and try again. So let's do that again. So there's the bearing back there, and let's pop that in, and it should now sit correctly and engaged in there. So jiggle. Yeah, I think we're getting there. There we are. That looks a bit better. There we go, that looks a lot better. There we go. Now we've got a little squish of grease there, so now I've got to tighten these up with some screws. That way around, because we're going to get some of these locking nuts. This one, this one. That's white, so the locking nut is there. So pop one there, and let's pop another one on there. And that should hold that in place. Yeah, that's better. A bit greasy, but yeah, don't worry. Right, that is now step 24 completed. We now need to adjust the motor mesh and we'll be laughing.